Well, city life is interesting, but full of danger. The flop house and the cheap hotel are not really safe places to be. So the hobos started their own communities on the outskirts of a town. They called them jungles. They were campsites, places where the hobos could congregate to pass their leisure time outside the urban centers. Now, Alan Pinkerton, the famous detective, gave one of the first descriptions of a hobo jungle way back in 1877. Now, he didn't even use the term hobo then because it wasn't common to use that term then. But he did describe a scene that would become very common in many places around the United States over the next many decades. Picture this, he said. It is night, and in a deep gorge near the railroad, where the trains are constantly passing and repassing, a collection of some 20 or 30 outcasts who have been driven from a neighboring village are gathered together. At the bottom of the gorge, where a stream of water leaps down from the hills through the stone archway which sustains the tracks, are sleeping or dozing around a fire. Well, he goes on and on, but you get the idea. The jungle was a safe place for the hobos, a place where they could be all by themselves. And many of them were temporary, but some of them that were especially good became permanent. If you had a lot of wood to build a fire, if you had running water where a fella could wash himself and wash his clothes, it would make for a more permanent jungle. If it was a place where the train slowed down so you could get on and off, that made for a good jungle. It was a place for the hobos to rest and repair between trips. It was a place where they shared the songs and the stories of the hobo. It was a place where the old-timers taught the road kids the tricks of the trade. So it was a place good for the hobos. And as I mentioned, over time, it became somewhat permanent. And it was one of those places where they taught each other the secret hieroglyphic code that the hobos used to mark the houses so that everyone would know, all the hobos would know, what kind of reception they would get there. For instance, if you maybe had a mother or grandmother who fed all the hobos, you probably wondered, how did they know that my grandmother was a soft touch? Well, they would take chalk on slate or maybe charcoal on wood on the back of the barn or somewhere you wouldn't see it, but they would make little marks that the other hobos knew to read to explain the reception they would get. For instance, if you saw a circle with an arrow going through it, it would say, there is no use going this way. Now, if you saw the same circle with the arrow, but it didn't have the line through it, it would say, go this way. 3 diagonal lines in a row meant this is not a safe place. And they would mark it for the kind of handout you might get. For instance, if you had a circle with an X, it would say, good place for a handout. But they got more particular than that. For instance, if you saw this is a little thing here, and then little triangles, that meant, kind lady lives here, tell a pitiful story. This thing that kind of looks like a top hat would say, kind gentleman lives here. If you saw a cross, these fellas being practical, it meant religious talk here will get you a free meal. And there were other signs. Here's one you better know before you're out on the road. You got a square with a line and 3 lines coming down, 4 lines coming down in this case. That says, vicious dog lives here. You may want to avoid that. Yeah. If you had a curlicue with an X and circles there, that meant freshwater, safe campsite. Yeah. And two circles right next to each other, that means police here frown on hobos. Yeah. And then, of course, if you had a rectangle and a square and a triangle and two circles, it would mean good place to catch a train. And there were many others, but that'll get you started. So you may wonder, what was the perfect hobo jungle? Well, it would be just like the one at the Big Rock Candy Mountain. And that's coming up next, as soon as I get to it.